everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope you're all well. So at least the snow's gone. It's warmed up a little bit here. It's not too bad now. So you might be thinking, this is a members live. Why can I see it if I'm not a member? Well, it's because while it's live, everyone can see it. You don't have to be a member to see this live stream while it's live. You do, however, need to be a member if you want to chat. And then after the live stream ends, when I click end, I'll wait a couple of minutes, but I'll switch it over to members only. So that means that only members will be able to watch the replay. So that's kind of my compromise, because I don't put in too much paywall. So this is my little compromise. I feel comfortable with this. Kyle's just turned all the lights off, so it's now pitch black. I can't see a thing except the computer screen, which is all I've got to see anyway. So hold on, I'll just shout him. Kyle, can you put the light back on, please? Okay. All right. I've got a bit of vision back. All right, so we're going to talk about Stanford Prison, the Stanford Prison Experiment. This is Psych 101, like in your first year of psychology undergraduate. Doesn't matter what university you're at, seemingly. You do the Stanford Prison Experiment. It's one of the iconic experiments in psychology. And it's still debated on what it actually tells us. What does it show us? What does it teach us? Still debated. Not only amongst undergraduate classes either. Right? It's people still writing about it. There's people still, a BBC a few years ago did an attempt to replicate the Stanford Prison Experiment. So a lot has been said about it. You've got Stanford Prison, you've got Milgram. There's a few others that are just iconic that everybody knows about. So if you've done any psychology at all in your life, like, academic wise, you might have heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment, but I'm not here to give you a psychology lecture. This is very relevant. So I've decided to do Stanford Prison for a very particular reason. All right. So I've got some slides, which I'm going to put up in a minute. And first of all, though, I'm going to say a few hellos. We got We Are Dust. We've got Yvonne. We've got Robin. We've got Holly. We've got Veronica. Thank you for joining. Welcome to the Secret Agents Club. And Mimi Toyer as well. Thank you for joining. We got Susan. We got Light the Way. Ooh. Ha. I think you know where I'm going. With this live here. CW's doing the horses, but he's listening. Did bare minimum psych while I was a student nurse back in the dark ages. Well, Stanford Prison was also in the dark ages. It's as old as I am, but it's very relevant. Oslin's in the house, as is Tracy, Paper Chaser, Angie Baby. We got Bunny. We got Helen. Hi, guys. We got Phenomenal. We got Cecile. We got Lisa. We got Shazza. We got, who else have we got? Mary. I think I've said Holly. Definitely said We Are Dust. Steph. Hello to you. I think we got everybody. Hedgie Mum. So thank you all. Thank you all for checking in. Right. Without further ado, let us share the old screen here. Share my whole screen, which I don't like doing, as I always say every time I have to do it. But I can add these slides to StreamYard to do it straight on StreamYard. However, hold on, I need to make my screen a bit bigger. Do I? Let's have a look what I'm on. Yeah, I do. But if I add them straight to StreamYard, it doesn't let me do animations. And I've got animations in it, so I have to do it this way. All right, I'm just looking at my other screen so that I can see what you can see, just to make sure that it looks okay. All right, that's good enough. All right. So welcome to Stanford County Prison. Stanford County Prison. Wow. On the morning of August the 17th, 1971, it was a month and a bit before I was born. So now you know how old I am. Not that it's a secret, but anyway. There was a bunch of young men in the Palo Alto area. This is in California, who were arrested. They were hiked out of their beds. It was an early morning raid on several properties, and they were arrested for armed robbery and burglary. And the cops who arrested them didn't make it quiet. Like, all the neighbors were looking like shocked at what was going on. And these young men, you know, in front of the neighbors, they were searched, they were handcuffed, and they were driven away. They were driven away as shocked neighbors looked on, because this was a very quiet place normally. So this was, you know, this was serious stuff. Serious stuff. Thank you, Purple AJ, for gifting 5 memberships. Thank you so much. So 5 more people can chat. We got Janine, Grey Wolf, we got Plants of My Jam, we got Jessica, and we got Delaney. Thank you so much, Purple AJ, and you guys enjoy your month's free membership, courtesy of the wonderful Purple AJ. Woo woo. All right, let's carry on. So they were taken to a real police station. These were real cops. Right, this wasn't, you know, they didn't do things by halves here. These were real cops. They would get sent to a real police station. They were booked, fingerprinted, moved to a holding cell. And while they were in the holding cell, they had to sit there with a blindfold on. And they were then taken to Stanford County Prison. Or rather, there's no such thing as Stanford County Prison. It was a jail mock-up in the basement of Stanford University. This was all a big experiment. So they got the local cops involved. How they persuaded these cops to do this, I don't know. But they did. And maybe it's something to do with Stanford University. It's one of the most, I guess, prestigious universities certainly in the Western world. You know, Stanford's very highly regarded. They got lots of money. So maybe they paid the local police department some cash to do this. I don't know. I don't think a lowly university would manage to recruit local cops to do a dawn raid just for an experiment. I can't imagine that many cops would do it. But anyway, unlike any other people arrested in the area that day, these guys were willing recruits. Now, they didn't know. They actually didn't know that they were going to get arrested by real cops. They didn't know that. They didn't know that they were going to get like dawn raided. They didn't know that they were going to be arrested in front of their neighbors. They didn't know that bit, but they were willing recruits. So these guys, along with the men that would guard them, were all college students who'd answered a psychology department ad. And I'll show you the ad in a minute. It's very short, but I'll show you the ad in a minute. And about 70 people had responded to this ad. And each one was evaluated. So each of the 70 male recruits, they were all like male, they wanted male recruits. They had background checks, they had a physical, they had mental health screening. So as far as the psychologists knew, these guys were just normal students at Stanford University. So, you know, you got to have a bit of brain to get into Stanford in the first place. But it doesn't mean to say that you're not a complete crackpot. But no, these guys were just normal students. And the psychologist had got the names of the guys that they wanted. They chose 24. And then they randomly assigned these guys to either the prisoners or the guards. Okay, so that's That's how it all started, and it very quickly descended into chaos. This is the ad. Male college students needed for a psychology study of prison life. $15 per day for 1 to 2 weeks. So they intended the experiment to last for 2 weeks, like to take these guys completely out of their lives for 2 weeks. And as I said, 70 people volunteered, actually more than 70, but it's like always 70 in the textbooks. This comes from, this paragraph here comes from the Stanford magazine, which is part of Stanford University. So the Stanford University are still talking about it. So, yeah, as I said, this was a fake prison, but very realistic. Like, it had all been mocked up to be an actual prison, you know, with bars and cells, and yeah, it looked like prison. They had a solitary confinement place. They thought of everything. All right. And the head psychologist who planned all this was a then 38-year-old professor called Philip Zimbardo. And honestly, this prison study made his career. Everybody who invites Philip Zimbardo to do a talk, do a conference, do a TED talk, he's done TED Talks and stuff. If you type in Philip Zimbardo in your search bar after the live, you'll find loads of interviews with him, and everybody wants to talk about the Stanford Prison Study. So I don't even know what he did after. Like, everything is about Stanford Prison. And this happened in 1971. So $15 a day in 1971 is a decent wage, isn't it? You know, for 2 weeks. But these guys, they knew it was going to be something to do with prison life. It was a psychology study, you know, and they probably thought, yeah, $15 a day, going to be easy. But it wasn't easy. It fell apart very quickly. So the warden, who just happened to be Philip Zimbardo, and this is one of the, I think, big criticisms about that's been directed to Philip Zimbardo about this study. I mean, it's not the only criticism, and in my opinion, it's a relatively small criticism compared to some things you could say about it. But, you know, he actually took part in the experiment. Like, he got into it. He was the warden. He was the superintendent. But he was also the lead researcher. So there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there, which may have potentially affected the guards' behavior. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. So the guards weren't given much instruction. It was basically do what you want. They did ban physical violence. Like, you can't beat people up on both sides. So both prisoners and guards. There were some rules, at least. You know, you're not going to resort to physical violence. However, the guards did everything but, and arguably they did worse than, like, beating them up. They got into their roles very quickly. And within 24 hours, those guards were humiliating and abusing the prisoners, like their fellow students, within 24 hours. And the prisoners were just completely shell-shocked. Most of them, not all, some of them did fight back. But most of them, like, within that first 24 hours, when they realized just how tough these guards were going to be, just became submissive and, you might say, depersonalized. Like, they started to lose themselves very quickly. Now, a few of these guys have been interviewed, and you may be able to find some of those interviews on YouTube. I've got a quote from one of them coming up, one of the prisoners, one of them who broke, one of the prisoners who really did not do well at all. If they did dare to stand up for themselves, and as I said, you know, some did, the humiliation and punishments increased. And the guards, no training, nothing. These are just students. and you're in the guards. You're going to be a guard. So just a guy who's responded to an ad. And within 24 hours, these guards had put together some kind of plan about how they were going to deal with subordination. And they just weren't going to have it at all. And the level of punishments that they instituted were very inventive, I've got to say. You know, they knew physical violence was going to be banned, and you know, they're on university premises, and obviously they didn't want to break the law, so they got inventive, and the behavior was so extreme that it had to be stopped after 6 days. And it was one of Philip Zimbardo's colleagues, who I'll mention briefly later, who stepped in and stopped it. It wasn't Philip Zimbardo. Philip Zimbardo had got into it. He totally got into it. He was enjoying his role as the warden, and he will admit that. He will admit that. So, again, this is from Stanford University, like the Stanford magazine, it's called. So where it says here 40 years later, this was written a few years ago. It is now 53 years ago. August of, so it was like during the summer, August of 1971. So the Stanford Prison Experiment remains amongst the most notable and notorious research projects ever carried out at Stanford University to this day. It's one of the most iconic studies. I think if you talk to an undergrad and said, name a famous experiment, they're either going to say Milgram or Stanford Prison. I guarantee it, at least 80% of them would choose either Milgram or Stanford Prison. I guarantee it. I can't think of any more that are as famous as this. So for 6 days, and this is according to Stanford University, for 6 days, half of the study's participants endured cruel and dehumanizing abuse at the hands of their peers, fellow students. At various times, they were taunted, stripped naked, deprived of sleep, and forced to use plastic buckets as toilets. So again, within 24 hours, knowing that physical violence was off the cards, those guards mobilized and used sleep deprivation. On the very first night, they began to use sleep deprivation. And if the prisoners talked back, and some of them initially rebelled, and it got worse. These guards, they'd mobilized. It was within hours. They were prisoners and they were guards. They were no longer students. This was real to them. But again, it descended into chaos, and it had to be stopped. One of the psychology team spoke out and said, look, Phil, you got to stop this. You got to stop this. So, yeah, but look, read that again. Read that again. At various times, they were taunted, stripped naked, deprived of sleep, and forced to use plastic buckets as toilets. So why on earth are we still talking about the Stanford Prison Study? Now, I can tell you that there is no university, certainly in the UK, and I'm guessing in the US, that would allow such an experiment these days. And I say that as somebody who's been on the ethics committee for 2 different universities. Like, I was on the ethics committee at my first university for about, I don't know, 8 years, 7, 8 years. And then I was at another university for nearly 7 years. And I was the chair of the ethics committee for that university. So I can tell you 100% that the British Psychological Society, that every UK university abides by, the British Psychological Society, it's the equivalent of the American Psychological Association, the APA. And, very strong ethical code. There's so much you can't do now. I mean, I think ethics has gone a bit mad. There's some things that I'm sure wouldn't result in permanent harm that you just can't do these days. But it was a different time back then. But what did it teach us? Why are we still talking about it? Why? How old were they? Just all young men. So between like 18 and probably 21. So, people who are studying Stanford University, people go to university, 18, 19. So young men, young adults. Let's get inside the warden's mind. What was his plan? Why did he do this? What was Phil Zimbardo's idea? Right? Because he was, 38. He was, he was already a professor. He was on his way to, a career, a very strong career. He's not going to jeopardize that career by doing something really wild just for the sake of it. There's a reason for this. And obviously, this was funded. This was approved of by Stanford University. It wasn't like Philip Zimbardo and his pals had built a prison inside the basement. No. And then paid off the cops. This was a well-funded study. And it was for a reason. So one of Phil Zimbardo's aims was to do a realistic study about social roles. And shortly after the experiment finished, he did a presentation to his department at Stanford University. And he told his colleagues that the experiment was not unexpected, like the findings and the way that they behaved. He expected it. And his reason was, because this study was a study about social roles, he said the rules were clear from the outset. So this is what Phil Zimbardo did to make sure that these guys got into their roles very quickly. This is what he did. So for the prisoners, just the fact of them being woken up at dawn, like the house raided, and it being an actual, very realistic arrest, so much so that the neighbours thought it was real. These are real cops. This is a real police station. They were in real cells. All right, so that first part was absolutely real. Once they got into Stanford County Prison, or rather the basement of Stanford University, there was an initiation procedure, which was going to be, very similar to how inmates are initiated into prison. So you strip searched, you deloused, you're given a number, and these prisoners were called by their number, like the guards call them by their number. They no longer had names, so they are numbered. What he did also was he gave them a gown. So they weren't in prison scrubs. They were in gowns, I guess you would say, similar to suicide smocks. And they weren't given any underwear. So these guys were very vulnerable, right? They're in these, Zimbardo called them dresses. So these are like knee-length gowns, and they didn't have any underwear. They were given loose-fitting rubber sandals, like slip-on sandals, like sliders, I guess. And wherever they went, so if they were walked around from one cell to another, they wore an ankle chain. They were, cuffed, and they had this ankle chain on them. And they didn't shave the guys' heads. But in lieu of that, I mean, because they could have shaved their heads, but in lieu of that, they gave them these like strange caps, which were made from women's nylon stockings. So there's a humiliation to this, you know, like you're wearing a woman's stocking on your head. You got this gown that the warden calls a dress. You've no underwear. You're very vulnerable. And this was done purposefully by Zimbardo to get them into their roles quickly. And it worked. It absolutely worked. Now, completely different for the guards. The jailers, they were given the upper hand from the start. Now, obviously, you know, this is a study about prison life, so they're not going to dress the guards in some kind of fluffy outfit, are they? It has to be realistic for the study's results to have any validity whatsoever. But they were given this striking uniform, like khaki military-style uniforms. They walked around with a stick. Now, they weren't allowed to use it. As I said, they weren't meant to use physical violence, but they're walking around with this stick. And I think the finishing touch was these mirrored sunglasses. Now, Phil Zimbardo got this idea from the film Cool Hand Luke, which I haven't seen for years. But for me, these mirrored sunglasses, it means that there's no eye contact, right? Like the big sunglasses, and this is an example here, the big sunglasses, so you don't see the jailer's eyes. So it's even more intimidating, isn't it? Now, as I said, you know, these guards, they weren't given any idea really about what too much meant, apart from don't use physical violence. Now, one of the criticisms about Zimbardo being the warden was that not only did he get into it, so he was no longer objective as to what was going on, because he was in it, he was in the role. But I think more importantly, for the guards, they knew the warden was watching. They knew the warden was watching. Or at least another member of his team were watching. And nobody stepped in until day 6. Nobody stepped in. So they just thought that they could be as extreme as they wanted, as long as they didn't punch and kick and, you know, and bite them or, you know, beat them up. They could basically do whatever they wanted. They could humiliate them. They could get them up in the middle of the night to do like 100 press-ups. They could do whatever they wanted. And because they weren't stopped, they took that as like tacit like approval. And remember, they knew Phil Zimbardo was a psychology professor. So maybe in the back of their mind, they thought, well, if we were really being too bad, he'd stop us. And this went on for 6 days. You gotta say though that not all the guards were cruel and tyrannical. Not all of them. Some of them were humane. Some of them were, you know, they were authoritative. They weren't taking their role like too meekly, but they were humane. Some of the guards didn't get involved in the more extreme stuff, like the sexualization of some of the behaviors. Now, there wasn't any out and out sexual behavior, but, you know, these guys were in quote unquote dresses with no underwear on. It's easy to make punishments feel sexualized, even if they're not overtly sexualized. And as I said, you know, the prisoners, most of them, after the first day, became just submissive and I guess just wanted to get through it, just didn't want to get noticed. They just became passive. Now, one prisoner that I'm going to use a bigger quote from in a second, he really struggled. But he noted that there was solidarity amongst like the prisoners. Now, I don't know whether you get that in a real prison. And perhaps you do get some genuine friendships in prison. I'm sure you do. But I think these guys just wanted to get through it. But it was too much. It was too much for 4 of them. 4 of them broke. Now, remember, there's only 24 guys in the entire study, and half of them were guards. So that means that you've got 12 and 12. So 4 out of 12. So a third of them. A third of them broke. Completely broke. I mean, this is one guy who just absolutely broke down. Totally broke down, and they had to take him away. And this is an example of what the guards are doing. They were lining them up in the middle of the night, making them stand against the wall for like hours, making them do like exercises for hours, just random weird stuff. You know, they'd not been told to do this. So this is what one prisoner said. And this is one of the guys who really didn't do well. The first thing that really threw me off was the sleep deprivation. When they woke us up the first time, I had no idea it was after only 4 hours sleep. It was only after they got us up and we did some exercises that they let us go back to bed. And I realized that they were messing with our sleep cycles. That was kind of a surprise from the first night. So from the very first night, these guards had worked out that can't use violence, but what we can do is deprive them of sleep. So get them up after 4 hours. You know, get them to do 100 press-ups, get them to do exercise, and then let them go back to bed for a bit and then get them up again. Keep the lights on the whole time. My parents came on visitors' night. So they had a visitors' night. And they were really concerned with the way I looked. I told them that they're breaking up our sleep, that we weren't having the chance to take showers. So that was another punishment. If you didn't do what the guards said or you pissed the guards off, you're not going to be allowed a shower. That's another way that you can just deprive them, get them to do loads and loads of exercise and then just not let them shower. My appearance really concerned both of my parents, my mother especially. When I asked Zimbardo's team what I could do if I wanted to quit, I was told, you can't quit. You agreed to be here for the full experiment. So look, they could quit. You know, they weren't actual prisoners, but once they're in the role and then they're told to, you know, they can't quit, then they're going to believe it, aren't they? They're going to, you know, they're sleep deprived, they've been abused, they've been humiliated. They believe that the psychology team are in on it because Zimbardo was in on it. Zimbardo, the guy who'd recruited him, the lead researcher, was the warden, was the prison superintendent, he called himself. That made me feel like a prisoner at this point. I realized I'd made a commitment to something and now I could not change. I made myself a prisoner. He didn't have any lasting effects. That's him now. He went on to have, you know, a successful career. It didn't permanently scar any of them. Let me just say that. And like I said, you know, a few of them have spoken out, both the prisoners and the guards. But then we go to prisoner 819. So I don't know how many days in this was that they realized that these guys weren't doing well, or some of them weren't doing well. So they offered to bring a priest in, like, you know, that they could come and offload to a priest. You know, they could come and have some time, you know, pray, be whatever, you know, however they wanted to, you know, initiate worship. And these guys agreed. Most of them agreed. But 819 didn't want to see a priest. He said he wanted to see a doctor. He was feeling sick, he'd refused to eat, and he wanted to see a doctor rather than a priest. Eventually, he was persuaded to come out of his cell because he's absolutely terrified. This guy is broken. He don't want to, he's just numb. Just numb at this point. So eventually he was persuaded to come out of his cell and talk to the priest and the superintendent, i.e. Phil Zimbardo, so we could see what kind of doctor he needed. While talking to us, he broke down and began to cry hysterically, just as had the other two boys that we'd released earlier. So this is the third guy that they've had to release. Like I said, 4 of them broke. 4 of them had to, they had to, you know, get treatment for and left the experiment. I took the chain off his foot, the cap of his head, and told him to go and rest in a room that was adjacent to the prison yard. I said that I would get him some food and then I'd take him to see a doctor. Now get this. This is how seriously the guards wanted to keep their authority. You know, so this is even when Phil Zimbardo himself is realizing that these prisoners, you know, it's gone too far. And this 819, he's the third one that's literally broken and has had to be released from the study. While I was doing this, one of the guards lined up the other prisoners and had them chant aloud. Prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner. Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess. So I reckon that the guards have gone up and just basically busted up all the cells. I imagine that's what they've done. So because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess, Mr. Correctional Officer. And they shouted this statement in unison a dozen times. So they were having them chant aloud, like stupid stuff. Stupid stuff. So this is 6 days. Now, I don't know what day this was, the 819 broke. I'm assuming it's towards the end of the 6th day, because they've already had to release 2. So that's just what I'm assuming. After 6 days, the experiment was stopped, but not on the request of Zimbardo, as I said, but his then girlfriend. So he was dating one of the, like the tech people, like the psych techs, like the assistants. Zimbardo was dating one of them. And in one interview, he was asked whether he was mad that his girlfriend had actually stepped in and stopped the experiment. And he said, no, he married her. You can't see that, can you? Because of the thing that says StreamYard is sharing your screen. But Zimbardo married that assistant who stepped in and spoke up. So all's well that ends well. Yeah, all's well that ends well. Anyway, this prison study made national news in the United States. Now, obviously, I'm far too young to remember this, but it made the national news, and Congress contacted Phil Zimbardo. Phil Zimbardo from Stanford University went to speak in front of Congress about prison reform. What's changed? Remember, this was 1971. Remember how long ago this was. But he told Congress that the majority of the participants, you know, both prisoners and guards, found themselves, quote, no longer able to clearly differentiate between the role-playing and the self, end quote. That they no longer, they were so into it, they no longer recognized themselves. They were just in this. Like the guards were loving it and the prisoners were enduring it. They were just enduring it till, you know, the end of their sentence. And you can see here that wherever they went anywhere, they were blindfolded, hands behind the back with cuffs and an ankle chain, wherever they went anywhere, like from one cell to another. Is it mob mentality? Yeah, of course it is. In just 6 days, quote, this is what Phil Zimbardo said to Congress, the experiment of imprisonment undid, although temporarily, a lifetime of learning. Human values were suspended, self-concepts were challenged, and the ugliest, most base, pathological side of human nature surfaced. He goes on to say the mere act of assigning labels to people, calling some people prisoners and others guards, is sufficient to elicit pathological behavior, end quote. That was in 1971. So what's changed? What's changed? Now, there has been actually quite a lot of prison reform in the UK. And I don't think prisons are as harsh as they used to be here in the UK. There are still some, notorious prisons. Bad things still happen in prison every day. But guards still don't like the psychologists very much. But every prison, they have psychologists, they have therapists, they supposedly look after the prisoners. But can we say that about everywhere? I don't think so. I don't think so. I do not think so. The Stanford Prison Study, though, this is the take-home, in just 6 days, shows us that extreme institutions breed extreme behaviour. They're not blank slates. And one of the criticisms about the way that the guards behaved and this way that they just humiliated and abused the prisoners was that, they were basically self-selected. They selected themselves into the study. The advert said that this was a psychology study about prison life. Now, Phil Zimbardo, I think correctly, countered that by saying, well, don't guards in the real world, don't correctional officers in the real world self-select themselves? Don't they answer a job ad? Of course they do. Nobody's forced to work as a correctional officer. They self-select. So like Zimbardo's students, real life guards are shaped by the norms and the prisons of the norms and the values of the prison institution. So if you are a new recruit, you're day one as a correctional officer, you might do orientation and health and safety and but very quickly you adopt the norms of that institution. And if that's a particularly extreme place where there are guards there who've been there a while, who are being really harsh, you're more likely to fall into that. I mean, yeah, there are some people, as there was in this study, who will remain humane. Not everybody will just become a sheeple and will follow, blindly. But most will. Because your work environment shapes you whether you know it or not. And I think Zimbardo was absolutely right in that. And also, when they responded to that ad, they didn't know what the study was going to be about. They just knew it was about prison life and it was going to last up to 2 weeks. Now, could they guess that they were going to go down in the basement into a mock prison? I don't know. But they also didn't know whether they were going to be a guard or a prisoner. So the experiment was actually less self-selected than the prison guards in today's prisons working as correctional officers. I'm not saying it's a bad job. It's a necessary job. What I am saying, though, is extreme institutions breed extreme behaviour towards the prisoners, but also amongst the guards. And that's not psychologically healthy for anybody. Harsh prisons breed even harsher guards, 100%. There's 2 real lessons for me. One real lesson from Stanford isn't that all human beings are capable of descending into sadism and tyranny within 24 hours. They are not. For the 6 days that the experiment continued, some of those guards continued to be humane. Whether if it was a real situation and they knew that, you know, that was their wage and the only way that they are going to, you know, get on in their career is to get harsher, possibly. But maybe the Stanford Prison Study didn't go on long enough for us to make that assessment, did it? What it warns us, though, is that when a situation demands it, at least some people are capable of surpassing all expectations. Zimbardo expected that there was going to be, you know, the social roles, that they would develop quickly because he set the scene. He made the prisoners meek, subordinate from the outset by the way they were dressed, by the way they were treated, and he made the guards, you know, feel like $1 million with their cool hand Luke sunglasses. You know, he bigged them up. He gave them almost free rein as to what, you know, what they could do. They could set their own rules, mainly. And some of them went beyond, I think, probably what any of that psychology team expected. Did they really expect that on the first night, the guards would have mobilized enough to have initiated sleep deprivation? That's pretty extreme. You know, is it the Russians during the war who were the absolute masters of sleep deprivation? I know there's one country that are absolutely famous for it. And it works. It absolutely works. Drives you crazy. Keep the lights on all the time. Don't let them out. Don't let them shower. Don't let them use a proper toilet. Make them use a bucket that they have to slop out. Finally, this is the one real take home for me. This is the real shocker. Stanford also shows us that some people can be broken, literally broken, literally depersonalized, numb in just 6 days. Because a third of these boys, young men, literally broke within 6 days. But Stanford was just a study. These weren't real prisoners. They could tap out. They could quit. I know that they were told they couldn't, but they could quit. You know, once they broke, once the psychologists were that concerned about them, they let them leave. That's not the case in a real prison, is it? What happens to those that can't leave? Well, I'll tell you what happens to those that can't leave. That's what happened to those that can't leave. And this is the reason why I did Stanford Prison today. I never thought, when I quit my job as a psychologist, as a psychology lecturer, I thought, well, I didn't actually think, I'm never going to talk about Stanford Prison again. But I've never needed to talk about Stanford Prison until now. Because the way that Richard Allen has been treated is in every which way the same, and then some, and then way worse, as the guards treated the prisoners at Stanford. And after 6 days, a third of those prisoners had broken and had to be, you know, led out for treatment. They're all fine now. But imagine if that's real. On your first night, you're sleep deprived. On your first night, you're shackled. On your first night, you're given a gown to wear. Nothing else. You got guards who, well, they're not going to be humane, are they? And it seems that what Richard Allen endured at Westville and then maybe even at Wabash, but I don't think at Wabash was as bad. That broke him. And for those people who say that Rick Allen wasn't really broken, that he was faking so that he could, you know, get the confessions off his chest and then deny it. Absolute complete bullshit. And what you need to do is you need to buy the cheapest second-hand psychology textbook you can off Amazon or other bookstore of your choice and read a little bit more about the Stanford Prison Study. Because there isn't a psychologist in this world who would agree that the treatment that Richard Allen faced is any different than what happened in Stanford Prison, except that Stanford Prison was an experiment. Richard Allen wasn't in an experiment. Richard Allen was in a hellhole. So if anybody comes to me in future, because many people do in my comments, and say that I'm gullible, that I've believed everything that the defense has fed, and that Rick Allen was faking it, and oh well, it doesn't matter if he was harshly treated, you know, he wouldn't confess if he didn't do it. BS, absolute BS. If Stanford Prison happened today, if Stanford Prison was allowed today, I would write to that psychologist and I would give them Rick Allen's case. And I would say, this is the way that he was treated. Can you just kind of slip it into your protocols that you give the guards to do some of these things? just to prove it in a controlled way. Get them to make a false confession. What conditions need to be there where somebody will confess to a crime that they didn't do? We don't need to do that study. It's not ethical these days. We don't need to do that study because we already know the conditions that are necessary to elicit false confessions. We know it. And anybody who doesn't think that people make false confessions and people think that, a psychologist who is maybe potentially speaking to YouTubers behind the scenes and telling them stuff months before the trial, a psychologist who absolutely does not deserve. I can't believe that Monica Waller is still allowed to call herself a psychologist. She has broken every rule in the book. If you think that somebody like Monica Waller, who quite frankly has the morals of an alley cat, who's going to YouTubers telling them stuff that Rick Allen has said way before the trial, isn't gonna work with perhaps the prosecution to implant some memories into him. And when I mentioned that in a previous live stream, somebody commented. I didn't screenshot it. I should have done. I will never be able to find it now. Someone said, "Oh, you're that gullible that you believe that he had memories implanted in him. What are you doing? You've lost your head." No. When we say implanted memories, it doesn't have to be some MK Ultra thing. It doesn't have to be something really off the wall. When somebody's in psychosis, all you have to do is suggest something to them in a way that makes sense to them. Don't you think that a psychologist would be able to do that? Of course they would. That's their job. What do you think therapy is? What do you think therapy is? You're implanting new memories. Well, not new memories, but you're implanting new processes. You're implanting new cognitive processes in somebody's head. That's what therapy is. So somebody in psychosis, and she admitted that she was talking to him about what she was seeing on podcasts. Well, don't you think during some of that talking to him about the podcasts, she wasn't implanting stuff in his head? Of course she was. Of course she was. So if Stanford Prison was to happen today, I would want the psychologists to use Rick Allen's case as an exemplar. It won't happen. It's not ethical. I don't want it to happen. But, you know, this was a different time, and this experiment has passed down through the generations of psychology students. I was taught it in year 1 of psychology undergrad, and then I taught it for 20 years as a psychology lecturer, because it is so very important to the understanding of forensic psychology. But not only forensic psychology, it's not just relevant to crime and prisons. This is how social roles work throughout the world. And most people are sheeple. Most people get into their roles very quickly. What can you say? Anyhow, that's why I wanted to do Stanford Prison. I think I'll add this to the Delphi Murders playlist. Like, obviously, only members are going to be able to see it, but it might give it, it might give some people some food for thought. Is it any wonder he confessed 60 times? Exactly. And he didn't really confess 60 times. He didn't really confess 60 times, because I don't consider I murdered Abby and Libby. I did it as an actual confession. Like, I mean, it is, but there's no substance to it. You know, I could say I murdered all of the people that Peter Sutcliffe got arrested and convicted for. I did it. Peter Sutcliffe's the Yorkshire Ripper, by the way. I did it. I did them all. If I walked into a police station and said that, what do you think they'd do? They'd tell me to go home. All right, let's make it something more realistic then. Let's go in and say that I murdered, I don't know, somebody who's recently been murdered. I'll find somebody who's recently been murdered in the area, and I'll go and say I did it. What do you think is going to happen? Well, they're going to get me in for questioning. They're definitely going to get me in for questioning. But once they realise that I don't know anything, I'm not going to say anything that leads them to believe that I actually did it. What are they going to do? They're going to let me go. Not going to keep me, are they? No. But Rick Allen, they'd already decided. Jerry Holman had already decided that he was going to arrest Rick Allen. Got him there on some pretense. He'd already decided he was going to get Rick Allen that day, and he was going to get the evidence later. And when they did the search warrants and they, did the stuff that they needed to do to hopefully find the evidence, they didn't find any evidence. So at that point, instead of letting him go, which would have meant they had a whole lot of egg on their face, at that point, they should just let him go. But no. What did they do? They shipped him off to Westville. What did they do? They cranked up the pressure. That's what they did. That's what they did. So there you go. Welcome to Stanford Prison. Or should I say, welcome to the Westville Correctional Facility. Rick Allen has been set up. I'm 110% convinced of it. So there you go. There you go. So I'm glad I did this tonight, and I'm going to direct everybody to this live stream who comes into my comments at a later date and says, "You're so gullible, Michelle." No, Michelle is not gullible. Michelle is educated. Michelle knows these things. Anyhow, has anybody got any questions or anything? I'm going to keep this reasonably brief. I'll go up a little bit and see if we've got questions. Alley cats have better morals. They totally do. Read John Grissom's Framed non-fiction, guys who falsely confessed in the first 24 hours of interrogation. Yes, false confessions are done so often. Why do you think the cops keep details back from crime scenes? It's not all about protecting the integrity of the investigation, as in, we don't want to let the cat out of the bag because it will, it will cloud the jury pool. I mean, yeah, that's relevant, but it's so that when they actually get someone, they get the right guy or girl. They keep crime scene details back for that reason. Because people, look, there's nutters everywhere. People confess to notorious crimes. People pretend. They just want their 15 minutes of fame. It's just nuts. It's just nuts. People either do it for a laugh or just that they're genuinely bonkers. Genuinely bonkers. Yeah, she was following orders, yeah. I think she was. She was following orders that had come down from Gallipoo or whatever his name is. And where had he got his orders from? Do us a favour. Do us a favour. I'd love to know what the links were between Gallipoo, Slick Nick, and Francis Gull. Thank you, Suzette, for the $3.99.99 South African Rand. That's very kind of you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Very kind of you. Yeah, and you don't have to be like beaten up to get you to confess. Once you're in that state, once you've had the harsh treatment, what you then do is you say, very nicely, you say, look, this will all stop. If only you just told us that you did it, we'd make this stop. And, you can have your tablet back, or you can have a phone call with Kathy, or we could even get Kathy to come and see you. We'll arrange for Kathy to come and see you. If you just tell us what you did, that's all they need to do. Once he's in that frame of mind, that is all they need to do. Thank you, Light the Way, for the £10. That's very kind of you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Don't do that. What? Walk into a police station, say that I committed the Yorkshire murders. Given that I was only like a little kid at the time, I don't think they'd believe me. Yeah. And more people should do it. More people should get just a little bit educated. I'm not saying you've got to do a psych degree or anything like that, but just think. Maybe there's some evidence behind what Michelle is talking about. Yeah, anybody can watch this, but only members can comment. But afterwards, I'm going to put it on members only, so only members will be able to watch the replay. Yeah, yeah. I unbanned everybody off the channel during the Lilani Simon trial when I mistakenly banned Gemma, and I couldn't work out how to unban her, so I just unbanned everybody. But the banned list is filling up nicely again with people that I'm sick of. Like, look, if you respect, you don't have to have the same opinion as me as long as you're respectful. But some people are just, they're just ridiculous. They're just ridiculous. Yeah. Maybe they should. It's a very good point. Like, include it in the opening arguments and closing arguments. Get a psychologist in who can speak to it. Blocking everybody. Why has Judge Gull gone along with it? I'd love to know. I'd love to know what the connection is between Gull, McClelland, and Gallipoo. I'd love to know. Oh, have they? I don't watch any of them. I didn't know that. Have they? Dirty deleting. Dirty deleting. Yeah, I mean, look, it's so well known amongst psychologists or psychology students that I forget that the vast majority of people that I speak to on a daily basis don't know anything about psychology. I went 20 odd years talking to people about psychology and no one else. I mean, yeah, I did have some friends that weren't psychologists, but once you tell them that you work at a university and you're a psychologist, all they want to talk about is psychology. People are fascinated by it. So some of the crap that I told people, if I was, when I was young and stupid and I used to drink alcohol, some of the crap I told them, honestly, I don't know what they thought. But now, I don't speak to anybody who's a psychologist, and I forget. But people don't realize this stuff. Oh yeah. I don't know what they could do about it. No, I don't think they could do anything about it now. If they'd have known at the time, I don't even know they could have done anything about it then. Monica Waller is no longer allowed to work at Westville. So, I don't think she's been fired, but she's been moved. She's been moved on. So presumably she's had some kind of disciplinary, but the deal was done. The dirt's been dished. I don't think we can walk that back now. There's a clip of one YouTuber talking about exactly what the confession was, about the van, Brad Webber's van. And that person should know better. That person should absolutely know better. The reason being is because they've been in the Delphi case for a long, long, long time. And I'm sure they know what Brad Webber said originally. I'm sure they know. Sure they do. Can we get an update on Kohlberger and Stefan Stearns? The Kohlberger stuff, right, there's all a load of new motions come out. I'm waiting for the state's response before I do any videos about it. So I'm aware of it. I'm just holding back. I want to know the state's response first. Stefan Stearns, I've kind of got a little bit bored with Stefan Stearns because, look, he did it. What else could I say? He did it. The only outstanding question for me is how much Jen knew. That's the only outstanding question, and I feel that I've said everything I need to say about that for the moment. So I do dip in a little, to the odd video just to see if there's anything new, but I've kind of got a bit bored with it. There's nothing like really, there's no question in my mind. There's no question in anybody's mind, I don't think, that he did it. I mean, like I said, the only question would be whether what Jen knew. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because remember, it's not just words. It's like the crime scene photos. Why do you think that he was stuffing like papers like down his toilet and eating them? Probably because he couldn't bear to have them in his cell. The only place he could put them to destroy them is either in his own body or in the toilet. Huh? Yeah. That's a link. That's a link. It's always good to have a banned list. Always good. Always good. Judge Ghoul, no nexus. Yeah. She absolutely was. She fitted up. She made that trial. She made that trial go the way that she absolutely wanted to. Absolutely wanted to. Would I ever do a meetup? I'd never say never, but I wouldn't especially like arrange it. Head of the ordinists. Oof. Could the defence use the experiment in an appeal? Yeah, I guess they could mention it. I guess so. I guess they could mention it. But, what weight would it have? I don't think it would have much weight to anybody who is in the legal field. I don't know. I might be wrong. Oh, Kohlberger facing the death penalty. Yeah. What can I say? There's no surprise that the judge denied the defence motion to take the death penalty off the table. It's not surprising at all. Hey, Kimberly's gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much. I've turned my other computer off, so I can't see who got them, because I'm just on StreamYard now. But welcome. Thank you so much, Kimberly. And if you got one of those gifted memberships, welcome. Get them on the stream membership. So you can go and check out the other members' lives, the little videos that I've got, status updates, which are mainly dogs. Gavin Fish had a psychologist on with a whole new take on Jen. Do I think Jen should be charged? They can't charge her if they don't have the evidence against her. That's the thing. What could they actually charge her with that could stick? Neglect, I guess, but I don't know. I'm sure that those cops, they worked her very hard. I am absolutely positive that they wanted to charge her. They just didn't have enough. And I'd rather them not charge her at this moment in time if the charges aren't going to stick and if the charges are erroneous. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the defense can hire PIs. Obviously, though, these are public defenders. So where would the money come from to pay them? But if they had investigators who, you know, belong to their firm, then absolutely, yeah. That's right. The trial was the baby she delivered, yeah. It was her baby. And she doesn't care. She doesn't care that it'll go to appeal. She doesn't care. Because, you know, she'll just think, well, the appeal will be just as much fitted up as the trial. You know, if McCallum does get a new trial, there's a strong possibility, unless she retires or something, or they fire her, which they're not going to do, she'd be the judge again. So she'd just get to do it a second time. And then once you've had a trial a second time, then you're done for. You're done for. Absolutely done for. Oh, yeah. You know, that interview that we've all seen, that one cop, he was, yeah, he wasn't believing a word she said, I don't think. I mean, she's such an infuriating woman. They would have charged her if they could. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, there's crowdfunding for Rick's appeal. So, yeah, they could pay investigators, yeah. Absolutely. The Eastern Star, it's like the female equivalent of the Masons. I'm down to the end of the chat now. Oh, yeah. The world is still watching. Absolutely. The world is still watching. All right, guys, I'm going to go. Got down to the end of the chat. I didn't go very far up the chat, but I'm down at the end now. So I am going to go. So thank you all for joining me. And for those who've been watching along who are not members, I'll give you 10 minutes to finish. So if you're near the end, then you'll get to the end. Just put it on double speed or something, and then you'll get to the end. And then it'll disappear. It'll just go on to members only. So if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for being a member. Boo-boo. And thank you all. Thanks as always to the mods, although on these members' lives, there's not really anything to mod, is there? And yeah, thank you to those that donated. Hope you found this interesting. Welcome to the new members. Go and check out the other members' videos. And I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, before I go, I'll just tell you, I've recorded 2 episodes of Cold Case Christmas today. That's why there's not been a video on this channel. Not done anything on this channel, because I had this Stanford Prison stuff planned like for a few days. So I've just been able to concentrate on Cold Case Christmas. So I've recorded and edited and uploaded episodes 1 and 2. They're currently scheduled. So, yeah, I'm into it. So December the 1st, you're going to get episode 1. So go and subscribe over on Michelle Walk. So you're ready for it. If you like crime stories, these are cold cases, either unsolved murders or missing persons. And like in 15 minutes or under, it's like an overview of the case. If it's an unsolved murder, like theories, suspects, that kind of stuff. So yeah, done it for the last 2 years. This is season 3. So yeah, just thought you'd like to know what I've been doing with my day. I've been very busy. So yeah, enjoy the rest of yours, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.